Good afternoon. My name is Keith Krueger. I'm CEO of CoSN, the Consortium for School Networking, and welcome to one of our webinars on Ahead of the Curve inside the 2016 Horizon Report and Toolkit. And we are pleased that you're here today. This is part of a series, and I'll be co-moderating with my colleague Samantha Becker, or Sam, who is a Senior Director of NMC and the Horizon Reports. We've got a great collaboration between NMC and CoSN, and we're particularly pleased to have Sam here joining us today. Just to remind everyone, the mission of CoSN, this is our 25th year. We serve technology leaders in school systems around the country and the world around their strategic use of technology to improve teaching and learning. And particularly, we focus on things like leadership and policy. And in this instance, we really try to help school system leaders think about new and emerging technologies for learning. This particular project, the Horizon K-12 edition, we've done since the start of the K-12 edition in partnership with NMC, who does them in other sectors like higher ed and museums and libraries and regional reports. We're particularly pleased that this year not only are we doing the regular report, but we've created an accompanying toolkit. Some of you on the call today may have participated in a webinar we did a few weeks ago with NMC that focused a lot on the report. We'll certainly go over report highlights, but today we also want to highlight kind of how to really spark a conversation in your community around this report. We think the Horizon K-12 report is a great way to start a conversation of what learning should look like. And we can only do this because we have the support of Share Fair Nation, who under a grant from the Mortgage Family Foundation has supported this effort. And so I want to give a chance to Christine Tomasek, the program officer at Share Fair Nation, to tell us why they're doing this.
Thank you for the kind introduction and warm welcome, Keith and Sam. First, on behalf of Carrie Mortgage and John Farnham, the co-CEOs of Share Fair Nation, it's really a privilege and an honor to be with you today and to support the good work of the Horizon Report. My sincere thanks and gratitude to both CoSN and NMC for the opportunity. Share Fair Nation is here because we believe the Horizon Report embodies important work. For our community of professionals to lead innovation, we need a strategic plan that examines emerging technologies for potential impact on and use in teaching, learning, and creative inquiry in schools. This 2016 report does just that. As we know, it looks closely at what's on the 5-year horizon for K-12 schools worldwide. It examines which trends and technologies will likely drive educational change while acknowledging the potential challenges, many of which are solvable, some of which appear difficult, and a handful that present as wicked. It's important to note, however, none of the potential challenges ahead are viewed as impossible to overcome. Overall, the report acts as a roadmap for our community of educators to follow as we continue to lead innovation in education. It unites our purpose, it lifts our profession, and it benefits our students. And Share Fair Nation is thrilled to support it.
Thanks, Christine. That's a great way to start, and I want to introduce our panel of experts. We have a nice balance, both geographically and from different perspectives. We have Lisa Gustinelli. She's Director of Instructional Technology at St. Thomas Aquinas High School. She also works across the independent, private, and parochial schools in the Fort Lauderdale area, so she's going to bring that perspective. We have Tony Inglese, who's now the Chief Financial Officer, previously was the Chief Technology Officer for Batavia Public School District 101 just outside of Chicago, and Pete Just, who's Chief Technology Officer of Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township in Indiana. He's also a board member, and I should say Tony actually chairs CoSN's Emerging Technology Committee. So we've got a really interesting expert panel. And with that, I'm going to turn it now over to Sam, who's going to get us started on kind of what the reports have said, what the report says this year.
Thank you so much, Keith, for having me here, and thank you so much to everyone, the panelists, Christine, of course. We're really thrilled for ShareFair Nation's support. It means a lot to us. So when we have any edition of the Horizon Report, we look at trends, challenges, and important developments in educational technology. Of course, the tech is really important, but what these trends get at is, what the reality, pedagogical, physical, space-wise is at schools today, and what may be possible tomorrow, and what educators and education leaders are thinking about. So when we think about our trends, we categorize them in terms of 3 horizons. We have long, mid, and short-term horizons. So our long-term trends, like rethinking how schools work and redesigning learning spaces, may not be entirely new to anyone in the audience today. That's because we define our long-term trends as those that have been important for quite some time and will continue to be really important, as far into the future as we can see. And then our shorter-term trends are a little bit more of question marks. We're not sure if in the next year or 2 they're going to become so commonplace that we don't even talk about them as trends anymore, or if they may fizzle, burn out, sort of like a fad might. So those, are definitely worth examining. Before we delve into some of these trends, in a little bit more of an elaborate way, we have a poll for you about how trends are materializing across your school system. So just taking a look at the trends that you see on your screen. I don't see the poll yet. Perfect. So which trend do you see your school system adopting? Pick one, pick all of them. If you've picked all of them, then gold star for you. That's excellent.
Sam, while we're thinking about this, is there a trend that you're seeing across all the sectors, like libraries and museums, or is K-12 somehow different than what you're seeing with the other reports you work on?
That's a great question. I think there's definitely some unique nuances, but there's also some commonalities. So redesigning learning spaces is something that's really happening in any learning sector. We're seeing that, having more room and space for collaborative learning and for more active and hands-on and immersive learning is definitely fueling that trend in K-12. Whereas at libraries, now that we're moving to ebooks and more digital formats, that frees up space in the library, to do more hands-on activities. So we're starting to see libraries, and especially school libraries, become ideal places for makerspaces.
Okay, you got your results.
Excellent, and not very surprising at all. In fact, rethinking how schools work has been, I see that's at least tied for second place, is sort of a perennial trend that's been around for a while, but I think this was the first emergence in this report of collaborative learning. So it's really exciting to see that so many people are in a collaborative mindset. And just to take you a little bit further down the path of trends and what they actually mean, before the panelists respond, when we talk about rethinking how schools work, that really refers to a focused movement to reinvent the entire traditional classroom paradigm and rearrange the school day. This is being driven a lot by more innovative learning approaches like project, competency, and challenge-based learning. So those approaches are calling for school structures that enable more flexibility and allow for students to move from one learning activity to another a little bit more organically. A great example of this is High Tech High, which is an integrated network of schools in the U.S. that emphasize students working on projects outside of the classroom. And High Tech High is really great at connecting students with their studies through fieldwork, community service, internships, and even consulting with outside experts. They also routinely create media and exhibit it for real audiences, so they're always working on their presentation skills, so a lot different than a traditional school day. Another trend that's brand new in this year's report is coding as a literacy. This one really kind of, snuck up on us the last few years, but it's an exciting one because we're starting to see coding kind of being discussed in the same vein that a world language would be, where it's either part of the curriculum or at least a really prominently featured extracurricular program around coding. We know that there's going to be many computer science jobs in the future. Code.org projected that by 2020 there will be 1.4 million computing jobs, but only 400,000 computer science students to fill them. So there's an emphasis on students learning coding skills at a younger and younger age, which also helps with their computational and critical thinking. So we're seeing this especially, I think, happen more internationally. It's definitely happening in the US, but I would say places in Europe and in Australia have been doing this for a while. Tasmania introduced HTML and CSS coding to the primary school curriculum in 2015. And at Colf's Preparatory School in the UK, students are participating in a project-based coding club, and they use Scratch to actually develop real games and applications. So very exciting example of this trend. And I'd be very interested in hearing how the panelists are seeing these trends take shape.
Well, this is Pete.
What?
Why don't I go ahead and tell you a little bit about what we're doing and pass it on. In terms of redesigning learning spaces, we've seen quite a trend towards this, which is interesting because we actually renovated all of our schools from '99 to 2010, and so after doing that, one of the things that's kind of unfortunate is that we've got some bricks in places where we wish we didn't have them, but still there's a lot of flexibility in if you get the right kind of furniture, and that's what we've been doing a lot of lately, is making sure that we're adopting furniture that's flexible, even though the walls might not move as much as we'd like them to. And then also with our media centers, you mentioned the move away from paper books. We won't really ever move away from them completely, is kind of our stance right now, but many of the nonfiction products are really no longer needed, and so we've been cleaning those out, and we've got the largest high school in the state of Indiana, and I'd say in the last 3 months we've seen the amount of paper books go down to about half as we're trying to make space for a nice maker space, more flexible spaces for students to do capstone projects and things of that sort, which gets into a little bit of the redesigning of schools. And for a large school district, a large school like us to do that, I think is emblematic of a bigger trend that's happening across the country. It's a little easier if you're small, but we're fully committed to making that happen. And we've seen just simple things like providing larger screens and more collaborative spaces are really not that hard to accomplish. So where we thought they'd be a long-term thing, we're seeing that turn around within a matter of months now.
Okay, so I can jump in. This is so cool because I have to tell you, I'm on my phone because I'm actually in our media center, and I just brought a class. They're just finishing up in here, but I'm going to turn it around so you see not only the design, the collaborative learning going on.
That's fantastic.
Wow, that's so great to see.
Okay, let me tell you what's going on. I brought in the science teacher today, and I don't know if you can see, you're talking about that big display. Oh, there it is. It's in the front of the room. You can see there's a big display. First, I had the whole group there. They're learning about the carbon footprint. So I showed them a quick video about carbon footprint. Then you talk about collaborative learning, and the working collaborative thing here is we were talking about the carbon footprint, and I made a Google form, a poll, and I sent them out to the groups and did the poll, And then they are also doing another online poll about carbon footprint. One leader of the group, I taught them just today, they've never done this before, how to use Google Sheets. One leader of the group is putting all the data into a Google Sheet, and I show them how you could highlight it, and it'll make a bar. So that's not integration here. They're all working together and sharing their results. Then, come back to the front. On that poll that I made, that's gone out to every class that's come in here today. This is the 5th class. I'll show. We then turn on what's doing. And in there, came back, and you know, this is real life authentic learning. If they work with the company, they're going to have to show charts and graphs and statistics. So it's just pivoting what we're talking about. I think it's cool that we're discussing that and it's actually going on, and that's why it's a little bit noisy. I'm sorry, but I'll pass it on to you.
Yes, I have to say that's awesome. Only at a CoSN webinar where you'll see actual students in action around collaborative and active learning. That's so great to see. Tony, how about you?
Good. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So yeah, that is a wonderful example, Lisa. Thanks for sharing that. Batavia's experience is very similar to the trends that are identified in the 2016 Horizon Report. You know, like others, we're re-examining how we use what we call our learning resource centers, our libraries around the district. In fact, we just remodeled one and finished up that remodel last summer, where it looks like a cross between a corporate conference center and a coffee shop. And it's an elementary school. It's a place where students come and they meet as groups, or they meet with their classes. And yes, there are still books in that space, but they're not the primary focus of what they do there. And some other things that are happening too is as our computer labs disappear, we're repurposing that space in most cases as maker spaces as well. So you see that maker space come to the fore. You see opportunities for students to come and practice coding, or even play tic-tac-toe, actually, in the LRCs, some games, those sorts of things, some space for students to think critically about what they're learning and relax a little bit and collaborate mostly on the things that they're learning about and bringing those spaces together. The other thing that we're looking at, too, in terms of our classrooms is space that is typically owned by teachers. The vast majority of space in our classrooms, the walls and the square footage and the floor space, is space that traditionally is controlled by teachers, and we're examining some instances where students have choice over the furniture that they sit on and that they use. It's furniture that's movable, but also giving students the opportunity to actually control that space. And there's some promising research that shows that if students have control over their learning environment, that they're more apt to explore, and learning is much more deeper and authentic in those regards. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about here in Batavia.
I love the idea of giving students a greater sense of ownership over their learning and setting them up with really good habits to be lifelong learners and make those decisions. That's really great to hear, Tony. Thank you. So we know when we talk about trends and all the positive things happening, as you heard from panelists, there's also a dark side, and that's our challenges. But as Christine noted from the onset, these aren't impossible to solve because we have amazing practitioners and education leaders like you guys coming up with solutions all the time. A little bit different than how we perceive trends and technologies in the report. Rather than looking at challenges kind of around a time-based scale, like when will they be solved, instead we look at scope of difficulty. How hard are these challenges to solve? So we have solvable challenges like authentic learning experiences and rethinking the roles of teachers that our expert panelists believe is solvable because we already know how to put into place great authentic learning experiences, as you witnessed firsthand here today. And we also know, that there is a kind of an onus now on teachers to be less of sages on the stage and more of guides, facilitators, coaches, and mentors. But then we get kind of down through our difficult and wicked challenges, and we define those as almost seemingly impossible to define, let alone solve. So what's really key about the wicked challenges, like the achievement gap and personalized learning, is as a field to begin to reach consensus around common language to use to even define these challenges. So I'm going to put out a poll really quick about these challenges to see how they are disrupting and materializing across your school. And I'm excited to point out, too, a couple new challenges, not just to the report this year, but to the Horizon project as a whole. Advancing digital equity and achievement gap are brand new challenges. I'm going to be talking about advancing digital equity here more at length in a second, but the achievement gap really refers to, disproportionate student outcomes across different demographics, across different genders, across low income and minority populations. And what we need to be thinking about collectively is how we bridge that gap and make it so everyone has equal opportunity. Before we see the results, any guesses from the panel on what the biggest challenges are?
Definitely, my district was rethinking roles of teaching, and that's scary.
I would agree.
The teacher is always the information and the students receiving, and that's not what a teacher is anymore. They're a facilitator of learning.
Right. I would also say scaling teacher innovations. I think the way that our schools are designed, it doesn't lend itself well to replication of things that succeed in one particular circumstance and relating that to another in another school or even in another classroom down the hall.
Yeah, I would agree with the scaling teaching innovations. Around the country, we're not seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it in like pockets of excellence, but it's just not to scale yet.
I would agree.
Oh, looks like some of those predictions are a reality there. Look at that. Rethinking the roles of teachers is definitely a biggest challenge. So that's really interesting because our panelists identified it as solvable, but it could change from year to year as there's new developments. So this definitely will be one worth a close watch over the next couple years. So getting back to it and kind of delving in a little deeper to a couple of the challenges, I mentioned advancing digital equity is new this year. And what we mean by that is the uneven access to high-speed broadband, which is a rampant social justice issue that's not just impacting developing nations. It's hitting close to home here in the U.S., where 5 million households with school-age children simply aren't privy to high-speed service. So we know more schools are benefiting from technology and internet connectivity, but then what happens at home? There's what's called a homework gap, meaning assignments that require digital work may be given to students, and they don't always have the ability to do that at home, and it sets them up for, with a disadvantage. Luckily, strides are being made here in the U.S. President Obama recently announced the Connect All initiative, which promises high-speed broadband and technology access for every American. Of course, we know hopefully about the Connect Ed initiative as well. And then thankfully, we have advocacy organizations like CoSN aiming to bridge that homework gap. So they put out a digital equity action toolkit, which provides K-12 leaders in high-poverty districts with really timely info to expand technology use in out-of-school learning. And then we have a really great example happening in New York at Watkins Glen Central School District. There they recognized that high-speed internet access dropped off just 3 miles outside of the town, which has made it really difficult for students to engage in learning activities at home. So to solve this challenge, they equipped their fleet of 18 school buses with industrial integrated service routers, which is enabling students to do their assignments on the way to and from school, giving them some extra time and support, which is exciting. Another challenge that the panelists identified actually is wicked, and I'm inclined to agree with this one personally, is the notion of personalizing learning. I mentioned that we define our wicked challenges as not necessarily a common or well-known definition. Personalized learning is sort of in some nebulous territory, but it does refer to the range of educational programs, learning experiences, instructional approaches, and academic support strategies that are intended to address specific learning needs and interests and aspirations or even cultural backgrounds of individual students. So there's this really increasing value on customizing everything and the entire experience and providing learners with more flexibility and choice. But a major barrier to this is really a lack of infrastructure within school systems to support the dissemination of personalized learning technologies at a greater scale. We also know that technology alone is not the whole solution in terms of personalizing learning. Efforts for personalized learning must also really integrate sound pedagogy, and teachers really need to be included in the development process. Where we're seeing lots of glimmers of hope around this challenge is actually in Chicago. At CICES Irving Park, which is a charter elementary school. They're implementing a comprehensive personalized learning program where they're using individual learner profiles, growth mindset principles, and technology-supported learning environments with the goal of supporting greater academic and social and emotional success for students. They're one of 7 grant recipients in the 2016 Breakthrough School Chicago program, which is an iteration of EDUCAUSE's Next Generation Learning Challenge. So definitely one worth watching and noting. So discussion question for the panelists here. You've heard about some examples and some key definitions, but how are you overcoming some of these challenges in your environments? Maybe we could reverse it this time and go to Tony first.
Sure. I think, honestly, one of our greatest challenges is the notion of implementing authentic learning. It's a solvable challenge, and rethinking the role of teachers, those are both solvable challenges, but I think those are the ones that we're struggling with the most. We're fortunate in the sense that digital equity isn't a problem for us as much as it is in other parts of the country. We're a relatively affluent community. We have about 20% of our students that are considered to be low income. But very few, only I would say less than 100 of students don't have access to the internet. And we are able to partner with a number of charitable organizations that can really help get the access that students need. So we're really fortunate in that regard. But I think this notion of authentic learning and changing our curriculum, changing the way that teachers teach is harder than it sounds. I think the idea of problem-based learning, bringing authentic world-based problems into the classroom, it takes a lot of thought and a lot of preparation. And even when you have a curriculum that's built around this, it still takes a lot of time for teachers to coordinate these projects and these problems with all of the various aspects that go into it. Scheduling time to communicate with experts or bring real-world problems into the classroom. It takes a lot of time and preparation, and I think that's the thing that we struggle with the most. Of course, we're working toward personalized learning, and that's the vision of our school district. That seems more far off. I think there are some technological tools that we're bringing to the fore that can really help with that, can really help improve teachers' understanding of students' needs. And some of those other technologies are a little bit further off, and I think we're ready to process them and integrate them as they become available. But I think this notion of authentic learning is just harder than it sounds when it comes to actual implementation.
That's a good point. And I think authentic learning has been considered a difficult challenge in previous editions. And so it seems to kind of fluctuate as there's new technology developments or new pedagogies. So definitely one to watch. What about you, Lisa?
Yes, the personalized learning is good in learning analytics. Then the school has to hire somebody who's actually doing all the record keeping and reporting back on all those different trends over the time, because it can't just fall in the hands of one teacher. If you're really doing true personalized learning, you're going to want to follow a student from the time, say I'm in a high school, that they start until they are finished. And it requires people who understand how to interpret those results. And the classroom teacher really doesn't have time to. They do an informal assessment, informative assessments, things like that on print. But if you really want to get down to it, we're going to have to be willing to hire, a new profession where someone who's just aiding in advancing students through personalized learning.
Thanks, Lisa. Pete, anything that you have to?
Yeah, I think that what we have come to the realization of is that a lot of these things sort of tie together, and we've been working on the achievement gap issue for about 7 years now. Originally we had quite a bit of disparity in academic performance between different student groups. Just by way of demographics, we're about 78% free and reduced lunch. Many of our schools, we are about a third with African American, Hispanic, and white students. I'm not proud of this, but when we got started, we had a 65% graduation rate from our high school. We had a single high school at the time, the largest high school in the state of Indiana. And over the last 7 years, our story is pretty exciting because we really created what are called our multiple pathways to graduation. We realized that graduation rate was the ultimate goal of our students. It is the blue-collar side of town, and not a lot of students necessarily think about college, so we started creating a college-going atmosphere, trying to deal with kind of more authentic learning experiences for our students, and so we created a district approach that allowed some students to head towards a dual credit program. So now we have 400 students in a second high school that is really it's a college program that we partnered with the college. Those students over the last 4 years now, we have had 100% graduation rate from students that actually are not our top academic performers. Those students tend to stay at our large high school because that's where the AP classes are. The college prep program officially is there. This university high school actually has really students that are really smart, but maybe they've not tested particularly well, and so we have given them some options to really allow them to rework their knowledge towards mastery, and as a result of that, they've really risen to that challenge. And of those students that graduate every year, like I said, we've got 400 there. We've got about 120. This is a 3-year program. About 120 some graduate every year, and of those, about 120 receive their associate's degree. So they've got 2 years of college under their belt, which is exciting. And then we created a third high school, which is 100% virtual, but also has some blended options within our schools. And so we have really kind of 3 different ways that students can pursue their diploma. And so last year we went from that 65% graduation rate 7 years ago to 95%. So it's really worked out well for us, and technology has played a big role because of the online blended options that the students have, and creating the authentic learning experiences has been huge. We've also worked hard to bridge the digital equity gap. A lot of us know that we retire devices, desktops and laptops, a lot of times because they don't work well in an enterprise environment. And those devices we actually surplus and provide directly to the students with greatest need. And then we work with Comcast as our provider around here. We work with Internet Essentials to provide them with very low costs access. Unfortunately, we also have high mobility, so that doesn't always work. So we're going to be applying to the Connect All initiative, and as I understand it, we'll will be good candidates for that. So we've focused very high on even the wicked challenges of the achievement gap, and like I said, the online and blended options have really allowed our students a lot of abilities to pursue, have student agency, I should say.
That's great, Pete. Thank you. And you probably saw the big announcement by Sprint this last week about their new
yes,
one.
I did. Yeah.
Christina,
I called the Sprint rep right away.
Very good. Christine, you work with all kinds of school systems. I'm curious if you see, how would you define the greatest challenge that you're seeing across the United States?
We're seeing a lot of challenges with scale. You know, we're seeing teachers that are doing really great things in their classroom. They're turning their classrooms into maker spaces. They're putting the student at the center of learning. They're infusing technology. But we're seeing it in pockets in different schools across the country. And unfortunately, some of those challenges have to do with the culture in the building, as far as the willingness for other teachers to become early adopters, if you will, or to try something new. And so it goes to kind of changing what the teaching profession is becoming, and getting teachers to really kind of change their practice and take a risk. And from what they're telling us, lose control of their learning environment, and the fear that they have with that. So we work really hard to get teachers to go into other classrooms and see their colleagues being successful, and to break down what appear to be several silos within a school and open the doors for communication. And that's what we do when we offer our professional learning experiences. Educators helping other educators bring innovative technology into their classroom, putting students at the center.
That's great. Well, I think we'll pivot back to Sam now. The last part of the report is, of course, the actual technology trends, and I have to say, whenever we talk about these trends, these are the things that I call it kind of the Best Buy conversation. It gets a lot of attention. It probably drives the conversation in many districts. So it's interesting that the report over the last few years has been reformatted so that this comes last after we've talked about learning and challenges. So, which I like. I think that that's the right way to frame it. So take it away, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Keith, because we know technology that's not in service of improving teaching and learning, then it's just a set of devices, software, applications. So it really is all about how it advances deeper and better learning outcomes. So well said. Writing about the technologies, of course, though, is one of my favorite aspects. In the face of the challenges that we just talked about, I think the NMC and CoSN have chosen to be inherently optimistic organizations. So I think these technologies are a major positive. This current generation of students is really changing the game. The latest crop of students can be characterized as entrepreneurial, global thinkers who are highly social, visual, and technological. They've never known a world that couldn't be tapped into, in the palm of their hands. They're avid, aggressive, and unapologetic consumers and producers of media, and they really demand and devour interactive experiences. They're early adopters of digital tools. They're social media influencers, and they're also really hyper-aware of world issues like climate change and clean water. So we need to really, get up to speed with them. Self-driving cars and drone deliveries from Amazon will soon be the norm, and even the next generation of students won't know a world without this level of automation and efficiency. We're looking at technologies, we're looking 1 year or less, 2 to 3 years, or 4 to 5 years, but the nature of the Horizon project, we're also kind of considering technologies, even 10, 15 years down the road, because got to be prepared for students. There's a couple new technologies that the expert panel voted in this year, one of which is artificial intelligence, which is they believe is 4 to 5 years away from mainstream adoption. And mainstream adoption, I should pause and say, we use Jeffrey Moore's 20% principle, so we're talking about 20% saturation globally. And AI, or artificial intelligence, may seem further away than that, but then we remembered that really more basic incarnations of AI are already present in tools like our adaptive learning technologies. So that's going to be an exciting one to follow as, as more learning takes place in blended and online environments, beyond, of course, having the teachers there, having some sort of AI help moderate it and be able to understand and react to learner emotions. Are they struggling with the material that they're learning online? Are they grasping it well and they're getting too bored? Being able to have some sort of machine learning feature where teachers get in that kind of insight is particularly exciting. So that being said, just looking at some of these, the 6 developments in technology identified by the panel, I think we're ready for our next poll. I'm curious to see how these technologies are taking shape across your school system.
And I really want to remind people, in the chat function to please start posting questions, and hopefully we'll have a moment to do them. So, Sam, was there anything that really surprised you this year in the report of the technology trends that you weren't kind of expecting to see?
I think artificial intelligence was the big one that I was excited to see. It's an area of personal interest to me and always has been. But the others I was really less surprised about. It was great to see makerspaces voted in the 1 year or less horizon. That may be a little bit aspirational to think that 20% of our school systems will have a makerspace. But when you kind of break it down, a makerspace doesn't even have to be super high tech if you think about it. It's just about that philosophy of creating and making, so there can be more affordable tools incorporated.
I think the surprise I had was that online learning had never been in the K-12 report, and in many ways, maybe should have been in, when we started it, whatever it was, 8 or 9 years ago. I wonder about the framing of it, if it shouldn't have been blended learning at this moment as opposed to online learning. But I guess that's a quibble that I'll take up with the experts when we argue for next year in 2017.
I'm so happy that you said that, Keith. We're already reaching consensus because we've decided to retire online learning for next year because it is becoming so ubiquitous and such a given. But blended learning will remain a trend that that we discuss because there's all kinds of new strategies around it materializing almost daily. So
yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
I have a nice little slide, which we're not using today, but it shows all of the trends for all of all the technologies since we started the report, and it's fascinating to see how that sort of has moved. Okay, we got the results. You want to go? So online learning, wow. And maker spaces are big. Not so much in the ones further out. Obviously none in the wearable technology, which is maybe just thinking about. And virtual reality, very little. So everything else, though, there seems to be movement on.
That's great. It's interesting the disparity between the 2 midterm developments, robotics versus virtual reality. It seems like robotics is being, integrated at maybe a higher rate. If this poll is is any indication of the rest of the country and world.
Great.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say to delve just a little bit deeper into 2 of these here, and again, this thread on makerspaces is so important because, we were talking about some of the trends, more active, hands-on, and immersive learning approaches. Well, makerspaces is really the technology that encapsulates all of it. It's all about students learning to use creative, higher-order problem-solving through design, construction, and iteration, and them being encouraged in those environments to make mistakes because, failure is a natural part of, of success. So school leaders are incorporating making into the curriculum to encourage students and teachers to bring to life new ideas and their own ideas. And it's also helping students explore STEM subjects and technical disciplines because, learners as makers, it does involve a lot of technical skills. A good example of a makerspace is at Lighthouse Community Charter School, which is in Oakland, California. 7th and 8th graders there created makerspaces for 2 kindergarten classes. So the students made the makerspaces, which I think is just great. The students employed design thinking principles. They solved challenges that they experienced along the way and experienced productive failure. And they also honed their craftsmanship skills. Another great example, we know that higher education, is sometimes responsible for helping further some of these trends in K-12. So UMass Amherst, their makerspace, hosts youth meetups and after-school programs with the main goal of introducing girls and minority students to technology. And the university students there serve as ambassadors to the STEM disciplines, helping their younger counterparts envision themselves in developing interests and passions in these pathways. Another technology that I'm particularly, and there's another kind of example up there previously. Australia, the Iona Primary School is doing a really great job constructing a makerspace now. Virtual reality is another topic that the expert panelists voted into the report. And this one is, even though the technology has been around for a while, developments, in headsets like Oculus Rift and more affordable products like Google Cardboard are really helping accelerate this development and its integration in K-12. We know that students are craving more immersive learning opportunities, but we also know that not every school or student, can afford field trips or experiences where students actually get to leave the school and experience, real world activities or go to museums. And so being able to recreate, an ancient civilization right in front of students' eyes with a virtual reality, or in the case of a school in New Orleans, being able to have students experience a day in the life of a vet technician as they're kind of trying to think about, what their career aspirations are, really creates an opportunity for students to be in the moment and be learning through experience. And so that is one worth watching. In 2015, actually, last year, schools in Australia, Brazil, New Zealand, the UK, and the US began collaborating with Google to beta test Expeditions, which is their educational VR platform that allows users to experience over 200 virtual destinations. And those destinations have descriptions, talking points, and questions in ways that kind of help educators design, curriculum around the experience. The pilot schools also received training materials for teachers, software to create new expeditions through Google Street View. And also in my home state of Illinois, the Community Consolidated School District 62 in Des Plaines is participating in a way where students are gaining insights into real-world situations. And teachers are embracing VR to help students embark on otherwise inaccessible journeys. So far, the beta program has enabled 1 million students in 11 countries, which is great.
That's great, Sam. So I'm curious for the rest of the panel, what things are you seeing in your school systems? I know I was at the White House just a week ago, and they were showing off the National Geographic has a new virtual reality that they filmed or created in Yosemite, and President Obama gives you a tour through Yosemite. You can move all around. It's pretty amazing. So what are you guys doing?
For our district, it's been interesting because we were part of the beta with Google Expeditions, and teachers and students so loved that I immediately got grant requests for something that wasn't even available yet. They kind of forgot it was a pilot. But, they were willing to do bake sales. They said, what do we need to do? What we ended up starting was we started to replace our laptop carts that really weren't needed anymore because most of our students have Chromebooks, and we still have a lab available. So those laptop carts are now being replaced with Google Expeditions carts and moving around within the schools, and we're actually creating products internally for different grade levels and plugging that into curriculum. And so that's sort of a project that I put together a task force with the curriculum team to start to pursue. So the virtual reality opportunity has really made itself known just really through that pilot that just sort of exploded, and as soon as we got the go-ahead in the summer, we got started on replacing those laptop carts with Google Expeditions kits, we call them. So that's been pretty exciting for especially our elementary schools, which maybe don't get to do as many field trips as they would like.
Great. Tony, anything you're seeing in your district?
Yeah, our experience follows, I think, what the poll indicated. We're looking at maker spaces. We've implemented a number of them. I think on some levels they're still kind of a novelty. They're not necessarily tied directly to any curriculum yet, but it's certainly a fun place to go and explore. Online learning, we've been doing that for a few years, and we're starting to dabble in blended learning. And I think that, hopefully the panel of experts will consider that in future reports. We're considering curriculum and moving in that direction, and I think that really is kind of the bastion of where school will be headed. Online learning for us mostly is alternative approaches for students where traditional instruction doesn't work very well, so it's kind of limited in that regard. And also in virtual reality, we too participated in the beta program, something that's very exciting. Again, it's I would say a digital resource that's used in classes. It's not necessarily anything that is part of our actual curriculum, but certainly has some promising potential in giving students opportunities to explore things that they couldn't otherwise have access to. So very much like all the rest.
And Lisa, tell us,
yes.
But I'll also say we're having a little hard time with some of your audio, so the phone service doesn't seem to be...
You know what, where I am, I have audio, so I'm going to go out into a different area where you can hear me. Okay? Okay, so can you hear me now?
We can. Go right ahead.
Okay, good. Okay, so as far as the makerspaces go, we have that, but I would say let the robotics and the makerspace kind of overlap, because it seems like the same students who are working in robotics are the same students who are working in the makerspace. Barnes and Noble, I don't know if I think it's a national thing. They're doing a whole maker fair, and so we're kind of gearing up to go over there on November 5th and show off what the students are doing. I actually am helping facilitate just a technology open house, because just to show teachers and families that makerspace doesn't only mean the robotics and the wearable technology, which our students are doing also, but we're also having students who are taking animation class, students who are doing coding, students who are in video production, showing off their work as well, because they're creators as well. And we want everybody to understand that the making isn't only making a physical robot or whatever it is, that anytime they're creating, they're making. And then the other thing, the other trend is the virtual reality for sure. I'm hearing a lot about it. I'm hearing that it's going to be taken off, at least in this area where I am in South Florida. There's a company now making actual virtual reality experiences to sell to schools. So that's a really big one.
Great.
It takes a lot of time for them to do that. So.
Well, thanks so much. We're kind of running out of time, but I want to get to kind of the last thing that we wanted to highlight, and that is, how do you kind of take this static report put out by experts and kind of really make it a discussion about what does learning look like today? And I'm kind of curious if anybody has had some, we've created a accompanying what we call the digital toolkit, and it gives you some ideas for ways to kind of use the report as a catalyst, some how to get promotion about that, maybe with your PTA or your school board or your Chamber of Commerce. I'm wondering if anybody on the panel has had kind of that you've used the Horizon Report in any kind of creative ways. Any ideas or ways you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I can tell you that for our cabinet, we have an annual discussion on this. About 2011, I think I put together a spreadsheet that showed here's the Horizon Report, and here's what it says is coming, long-term, short-term, mid-term, and here's the different initiatives we've already begun in each of these or that we're talking about, just so that our cabinet, our superintendent understands kind of where it's a way to kind of reconnoiter, I guess, where we are compared to the bigger global trending, and that's always tends to be somewhat encouraging, but it also gives us some challenges to discuss as well. So that's what we've done, and then we typically will do a board report on those various things. So that's the way we've utilized it over the last several years. It's been very effective in also setting our next steps.
That's great. The school district in Minnesota, Lakeville, just south of the Twin Cities, had me. They brought me in to present the report to their school board, and we had a half-hour conversation about what emerging trends were important for learning. So, any other ideas or thoughts? Okay.
In Batavia, we used it as a basis for our vision for moving toward one-to-one. It wasn't anything creative, but using it as a discussion point. We pulled together a committee of stakeholders from every walk of the community, and yeah, it was just a great. It's a great build. It offers a great framework to think about what the future might look like, what you're doing now, and where you are in terms of being able to meet the future needs of students and improve learning.
That's great.
We're really using it as a roadmap to help program our professional learning experiences that we're offering for educators. And again, the idea of virtual reality, maker spaces, infusing technology into your practice. So we're really using it as, like I said, a roadmap for what we're hearing that teachers need to be able to teach as they move forward.
I love that, and I think that not thinking of it as what I call tablets, but rather as a conversation starter is just key to making it. You don't want to just talk to have the converted, the people who care about technology reading this. This is a real opportunity for a discussion about what learning looks like. So.
And one thing I would add is that I teach a number of graduate courses. Every course I teach, this is always the seminal document. This is always what starts the conversations. And I happen to be working on a doctorate right now, and I found it very amusing when the professor trotted out this document and said, "Here, I want to tell you about the Horizon Report." And I said, "Oh yeah, we can talk about that. It's excellent."
That's great, and I think Pete's idea of mapping out kind of what the trends are and kind of where are the gaps or what are you already doing is a great way to kind of help the leadership of your cabinet and school board. So, well, I think we've reached nearly the bewitching hour. I just want to assure you, apparently our website right now is having some trouble with the toolkit, but if you go to cosn.org/horizon, eventually the toolkit will be there. And you can find, of course, the report on the NMC website that I'm sure is working. And finally, I want to tell you about our upcoming annual conference. We'll be going to Chicago the first week of April 3rd to 6th, and it in fact is appropriately titled Invent the Future. We're doing that as part of our 25th anniversary and thinking not only about what change has already happened the last 25 years, but how do we use these trends and possibilities to kind of invent the future. So registration is now open. Please do join us. And Sam, anything you want to say about how to get involved in the Horizon Report for the future?
Absolutely. So if you agreed with something you heard today, if you disagreed and you're wondering why a certain topic didn't make the cut, we'd love to add your voice to the mix. You can nominate yourself to serve in a future NMC Horizon Project panel. If you also, were listening to the examples here today and thought, oh, my school is doing something great, which I know all the panelists are, please submit your innovative work, projects, initiatives, and pilots to us so that they could potentially be featured in a future edition. And of course, good old-fashioned email also works for getting in touch with us. And there's the email address if you wanted to reach out personally. And we're always posting great articles and research that are very Horizon-y on social media. So make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And we look forward to continuing these conversations.
And we want to thank Christine and the folks at Share Fair Nation and the Mortgage Family Foundation for their partnership and support and really helping us all make it. And we appreciate her cat's tail that we saw waving away.
Did you see that?
So we've had
it's a thrill and an honor, and we really are grateful to be part of the conversation and to advance the good work that we know needs to happen.
Great. Well, thank you all, and have a great afternoon. And, let's invent the future. Take care.
Bye.